We'll call this council meeting to order at 6 p.m. First of all, I need a motion for the adoption of the minutes, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on August 10th, 2020, and the minutes of the special meeting of council held at City Hall on August 26th, 2020, be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have no delegations this evening. We'll open the public hearing for variation order PC 5320. This is for Anne Ringland at 23rd Street Northwest. Is there anyone here to speak for or against the hearing? Final call. Is there anyone here to speak to the public hearing? Okay, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for variation order PC 5320 for Anne Ringland at 23rd Street Northwest now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, this comes from the Planning and Economic Development Committee. It is a request for a variation. The issue is to vary the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 3.94 meters to allow for a front deck. As always, our alternatives are to approve the variation, or we can deny the variation application. The background, as I've previously mentioned, is that the applicant is applying to vary the minimum front yard requirement from the 7.5 meters to be reduced to the 3.94 meters to allow for the front deck. You will see a number of approved similar variation requests that allowed for very similar variations. The building is in an R1 residential single-family zone. You'll also see that there was a sketch and a plan provided for your reference. The application has been circulated to the various departments with no concerns, and as you can see, there's been no public against it. Public notice has been sent to all property owners with a 100-meter radius, and there's been no objections. So, it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Anne Ringland to vary the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 3.94 meters to allow for a front deck at the property known as 23rd Street Northwest, which is legally described as lots 13, 14, Plan 18 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the public hearing for variation order PC 6020. This is for Roderick Lazan at 133 17th Street Northwest. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Okay, need a motion to close the hearing.
Be it resolved that the public hearing for variation order PC 60-20 for Roderick Lazan, 133 17th Street Northwest now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, once again, this is from the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and it's a request for variation, very similar to the previous one. So the issue is to vary the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters, in this case to be reduced to 5.2 meters to allow for a front deck. Once again, we can approve the variation application or deny the variation application. The background is that Roderick Lazan is applying for a variation order to allow the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 5.2 meters to allow for a front deck. As you can see, we just previously approved one. In addition, there's the minutes for very similar variation requests in the past. The building's in an R1 residential single-family zone. Once again, there's been a map and a site plan for your reference. The application has been circulated to various city departments. There have been no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and there are no objections. So it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Roderick Lazan to vary the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 5.2 meters to allow for a front deck at the property known as 133 17th Street Northwest, which is legally described as Lot 449, Plan 33 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Moving to committee, first up is Finance, Legislative and Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just one item on the agenda here tonight, and that is to address the travel policy. This was discussed at our last meeting in committee and really deals with some changes to total meal rate reimbursements from $50 to $60 a day, with increases to the amounts for both breakfast, lunch, and also the addition of the ability to stay with friends. So we talked about that. And then some changes to the vehicle policy that sets out provisions for city-owned vehicle and reimbursement for personnel vehicles when used at work. So there were no questions or no comments at our committee meeting, and so it is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the updated travel policy HR-AM and vehicle policy ADM-A.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions, comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Next up is City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. Community Services Committee. Councillor Draycott, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I did miss the last committee meeting where we did have a great presentation from Mr. James Kostachuk about the heritage book that was actually launched yesterday at Fort Lorraine Museum. However, because I missed that meeting, I was able to go onto YouTube and actually tune into the council meeting. So it wasn't actually like I missed it because I was able to watch the presentation. It was great, given by Mr. Kostachuk about the book. And that is unfortunately all I have for community services this evening.
Well, I can update council because I had the privilege of attending the book launch yesterday at the museum, and as did Ms. Van Oort. And book sales were fast and furious. If anybody out there doesn't have a book, they better get it quick. How many were sold yesterday?
Around 100.
Yeah, really good turnout for it. Very successful. And you can buy those books at City Hall. Okay. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Waterworks Committee has nothing to report, Your Worship.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And Public Safety Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing in public safety for council tonight.
Thank you. We have no deferred business this evening. However, we have some new business. First up is second and third reading of the tax sale bylaw. This is 20-8708, and this is Finance Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you, Worship. This item, if council does recall, has kind of come onto our agendas, come off of our agendas, and come on our agendas, and it's largely in part by getting some direction from our tax service and the provincial government as it relates to tax sales. And so in May, the city did commence the process to replace a certain bylaw for the tax sale of real estate or real property for any properties with outstanding taxes of 2 years. And then by late May, the province announced that they were pausing municipal work on tax sales as a result of COVID. So then we did not get this completed in time. We're now advised that this work will resume in late September, which will allow the city to hold a spring tax sale for any properties with 2018 unpaid taxes remaining. And so that first reading of bylaw 20-8708 was approved on May 11th, and we were proceeding with the second and third reading of the same with a small change to accommodate the 2018 tax sale by inserting the word typically in clause 2.0. So once a tax sale for 2018 unpaid taxes can be set with significant certainty, administration will return to council to approve a resolution on that date. And so there is some urgency to proceed with this bylaw so that we meet those dates and that we are fully compliant with our own bylaws. So that means that the tax sale date will be set as the second Monday in September, which is September the 14th, 2020. It is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move that bylaw 20-8708, being a bylaw of the City of Portage la Prairie to authorize the tax sale of properties in arrears, be given second reading.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions, comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And also move that bylaw 20-8708 be given third and final reading, finally passed, signed, and sealed.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. All those in favor? And that's carried. Next item of new business is the July 2020 financial statements. Councillor Buds, please.
Yes, thank you. This is for council's information, and it basically points out what would be known as our statement of financial position or balance sheet for both our general fund and utility. General fund first, followed by what would commonly be known as an income statement or statement of operations. It compares the actual numbers of the same position in 2019, where we are to 2020, and also that's for both assets and assets, liabilities, and income and expenses. So if you're looking for trends, obviously in 2020 we go towards a balanced budget, but the surpluses that we had in this time last year are very similar to the surpluses that we had currently. So the trend is our friend, as we like to say, and this is positive news. There's a significant difference in the actual surpluses in our utility side compared to last year, but there's some explanations in that regard, whether it was other revenue that was brought in primarily from grant revenue from projects that were underway. Any other, is there any questions as it relates to that? Councillor Draycott?
Thank you. Just for clarification on the 2020 budget line, is that 2020 budget to the end of the year, or is that 2020 budget up until July 31st?
That will be 2020 budget for the year. Any other questions? And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Next item of new business is the first reading of Bylaw 20-8711, PC 5620. This is city zoning bylaw amendment for Meadowlands Homes Limited at 38 First Street Southwest. And this is City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council in front of you, you'll have a report. Talks the issue is to commence the zoning amendment process by rezoning the above listed property from an R1 residential single family to an R2 residential two-family zone. To the City of Portage la Prairie zoning bylaw number 10-8492, and by giving bylaw number 20-8711 the first reading. So the background and property in question is lots 95 to 98, Plan 12 in the parish of Portage la Prairie. It's presently zoned, as we're aware, of R1 or residential single family zone. The applicants, Meadowlands Home Limited, do want to rezone this property to an R2 or residential two-family zone. The applicant previously, if you remember, has received conditional approval for a subdivision with condition that the property be rezoned, excuse me, Your Worship, rezoned from R1 residential single family to R2 residential two-family zone. Portage la Prairie Development states a number of things that this can fall within. I'm not going to go through each individual one, but they do fall under housing mix and affordability, under housing supply, and as well as infill development. In cases where properties do differ from the prevailing patterns of lot size, configuration, and orientation, it may be possible to provide the same site standards and pattern of development in these infill projects as currently exist within the surrounding neighborhood. The application, if approved, will be circulated to the province for review and comment after the first reading. And as per section 74(1) of the Planning Act, council shall indicate its intention to enact a zoning bylaw amendment by giving first reading, and then, once that's done, we proceed with the public notice as set out in section 168. The first reading of bylaw number 20-8711 will commence the process as defined in the Planning Act in considering this application. So it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie give bylaw number 20-8711 first reading, and then provide public notices as defined in section 168 of the Planning Act.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Next item of new business is July 2020 building reports, and this is also Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Worship. As always, I'd love to draw Council's attention to the permits that have been issued for the year to date, and we do try to compare them to the years previous. We did expect certainly a decrease this year based on the successful permits and the dollar values that we've had over the last couple of years. But surprisingly, the permits for the year are up. The dollar value is down, and sorry, Council, I draw your attention to the combined totals, which is regional for both City of Portage la Prairie and the RM of Portage la Prairie. So without getting into each one in details, you will see that they are certainly up in some areas. Residential repair is residential or new multifamily permits are up considerably over this time last year. Commercial is down in the new, but they're certainly up in repair, so there's certainly some renovations and that going on. You will see that there's a significant portion to new industrial permits, and we certainly are aware of what those are for. And industrial, once again, some renovations that will go on with that. And the one other thing that you'll notice as well is there's been a number of RTMs, or ready to move units, that have certainly increased that from 701,000 last year at this time to almost $1 million this year. So really good to see. Always makes me excited to see those numbers. And once again, I certainly want to congratulate the planning district and even our economic development areas as well for a lot of that work. If there's any questions? And that is the end of my report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Next item of new business is PC 6420. This is a request for an extension for variation. This is for Andreas and Emma Knob at 125 Tupper Street North. And Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. You will see a number of documents in front of you, Council. One is there's the order PC 5619. You'll also see a sketch and a map of where the request for the extension for variation. So, from the Planning and Economic Development Committee, the issue is to allow an extension for the original variation of Andreas and Emma Knob, PC 5619, to vary the rear yard requirement of 7.5 meters. Sorry, Your Worship. To be reduced to 4.82 meters. The applicant is wanting to construct an attached garage in the rear yard. So, the applicant originally requested an extension to their original variation order, which was passed by resolution number 2019-0138 on September the 9th of 2019 for an additional 12 months. Planning Act Section 101 does state that a variance order will expire and cease to have any effect if it's not acted on within that time period. A board or council or planning commission may extend the deadline under the subsection for an additional period not longer than 12 months if an application is received before the initial deadline. So, as per the attached original variation order on this matter, administratively, there's no concerns with the application for an extension to the original variation order, and as such, would recommend approval. So it's the recommendation of this committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the request of Andreas and Emma Knob to extend the original variation order, PC 56-19, at the properties on 125 Tupper Street North, which are legally described as lots 401, 402, Plan 12 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions on the motion? Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, as I didn't see it in the report, are we looking to extend for a 12-month period?
Through Your Worship, I believe that's correct, but I will just kind of get clarification from Mr. Brooks of the Planning District.
Yes, extensions are only allowed for 1 12 month period.
It says for an additional 12 months in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Any further questions on the motion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Final item of new business this evening is the WPCF upgrading status report, and this is Waterworks Committee. Councillor Wall, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's quite a detailed report here covering all the work that's been done since the last report and up to the end of August. And it's all there for my fellow councillors to read. I'd like to, though, cover what's coming up. The tax over the next month will include finalizing the Environment Act license, processing the ICIP and provincial funding agreements, responding to requests for information from the prospective respondents to the request for qualifications, hosting a virtual water pollution control facility tour and question and answer, preparing the scope of work for the request for proposals for the main contract along with the draft project agreement, and compiling additional historical documents and wastewater characterization documents City staff, with assistance from legal counsel, will collate human resources documents and develop the approach and terms of reference for the transfer of staff to the new contractor. And that's all I have to report there.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Were there any questions for Councillor Wall? Okay, thank you. We have no old business this evening, so council is adjourned at 6:21 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. And we'll call committee to order at 6:21 p.m. First up is Finance Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. City Planning, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing to report.
Community Services Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple of things that I'd just like to outline for people in Portage la Prairie tonight. Just an invitation from the Portage la Prairie Community Revitalization Corporation. They are actually holding their annual general meeting tomorrow, September 15th at 7 p.m. They're actually doing a virtual general meeting this year, and so the meeting will be happening over Zoom. If you are interested, everybody is welcome to attend that meeting just to find out what has been going on at PCRC and what they have in the future. And all of that information and the link to attend the meeting is actually on their social media platforms on Facebook and such. So a reminder for anybody interested in that. As well, I would just like to give a brief update for the Portage la Prairie Parks Committee. We did have cement go into the ground on the interactive water feature, the McCain's interactive water feature last week. So that was a very positive move for the Parks Committee. And we are actually in a fundraising week this week for the Parks Committee as well. So a shout out to Tim Hortons. The Parks Committee in Portage la Prairie has actually been chosen for Smile Cookies for the fundraiser this year. Cookies are $1 a piece, and any of the cookies that you're purchasing in Portage la Prairie will go directly back to the Parks Committee, all the proceeds that will be going through the Parks Committee for our next fundraising event, which will be for a skate park. So we're very excited to be chosen by Tim Hortons again this year, and we definitely challenge all of Portage la Prairie to get out there and enjoy a cookie or two this week. And that's all that I have for my committee this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Councillor Wall, the Waterworks Committee.
Yes, Your Worship. Some exciting news for those gathered here this evening and for the thousands watching on YouTube and home. The first of the two announcements I'd like to make is in regard to Carly Friesen, who has been awarded the William D. Hatfield Award by the Western Canada Water Association. The William D. Hatfield Award is presented to a wastewater treatment plant operator for outstanding performance and professionalism. Carly Friesen has served as the Wastewater Treatment Division Manager for the City of Portage la Prairie since 2012. Carly's a dedicated volunteer who's passionate about the water industry. She served on both the Manitoba Water and Wastewater and Western Canada Water boards and continues to volunteer as a planning committee volunteer for the Western Canada Water Annual Conference and through the Manitoba Provincial Council. Congratulations to Carly Friesen. The next award recipient, there's a picture of him here, and I worked with this man for over 20 years, and he never looked this good. It's obviously photoshopped, but there's a picture here of Kelly Braden, who is the winner of the George Warren Fuller Award, which is presented annually by the American Waterworks Association to a selected member of the section for their distinguished service to the water supply field in commemoration of the sound engineering skill, brilliant diplomatic talent, and constructive leadership which characterized the life of George Warren Fuller. Kelly recently retired from the City of Portage la Prairie after 31 years of dedicated service. Kelly began his career with the city as assistant city engineer for a short time, moved on as the manager of the wastewater treatment division for 6 years, and finally was promoted to the position of Director of Operations for nearly 24 years. This is a very lengthy write-up that talks about all of Kelly's accomplishments over those 31 years, but I'd just like to say big congratulations to Kelly Braden on receiving the George Warren Fuller Award. And that's all I have to report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Transportation Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And Public Safety, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I just would like to thank all of our citizens for providing feedback on our new parking strategy, specifically on Phase 2 and our changes to Heritage Square East and West. We received over 85 correspondence from citizens on this strategy. So what we've done is, based on that feedback, we are going to push our date back, which was originally October 1st for implementation, to November 1st. And we voted on that unanimously as council, so that we are going to go back to the drawing board and sit with administration and council and come up with a new report to bring back to council at a future date. So I'd just like to thank any of the citizens who took the time to write to us and talk to us about their concerns, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Knox. So committee is adjourned at 6:27 p.m. Thank you for coming out, everybody.